Grandfather is the richest man in the city. Also, I could live a life of leisure, relying on the elders, relying on children in the future, and a good wife in between. What a beautiful life. So he spent trillions to find me a wife who is a breathtaking female CEO. But looking at the stunning temptress before me, with her impossibly curvaceous figure, slender waist, and firm hips, I blushed, swallowed hard, and said coldly, "I don't love you. Don't love me either. After we marry, we'll each live our own lives. Aside from the title of young mistress of the Gu family, I can't give you anything else." However, I never would have imagined in a million years that just because of those stubborn, arrogant words, I would later wish with every fiber of my being that I could slap my own face. Just moments earlier, Grandfather had used a tearful suicide threat to force me into this arranged marriage. And when I finally found out who I was supposed to marry, my brain completely short-circuited. She is the biological older sister of my best friend, Shen Bei. And to make matters worse, she's 5 years older than me. Furious, humiliated, and burning with disbelief, I immediately stormed out, preparing to head straight to the club to settle the score with Shen Bei. But right as my hand touched the door handle, Grandfather's stern voice called me back. "Going out is fine, but don't do anything reckless. A woman's purity is the best dowry she can bring to a man." Hearing that strange, old-fashioned warning, my footsteps suddenly faltered. 10 minutes later, my car tires screeched to a halt at the club's entrance. The moment I stepped out, I spotted Shen Bei. He came trotting over with a beaming, obnoxious smile, slinging his heavy arm around my shoulder. "Dean, you're looking quite handsome tonight," he chuckled. With a cold snort, I violently shrugged my shoulder, shaking off his hand, and walked straight inside without uttering a word. Shen Bei jogged after me, utterly confused, his voice trailing behind. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" I whipped around, fixing him with a cold, sharp, venomous glare. Does this guy really have the nerve to ask what's wrong? I considered him a loyal brother, but his family wanted to make him my brother-in-law. Most infuriatingly of all, he had secretly conspired with my grandfather to trap and deceive me. Sensing the murderous intent radiating off me, Shen Bei opened his mouth to demand details. But before he could speak, a commanding group of corporate elites in sharp suits approached from the opposite direction, stopping dead in their tracks right next to us. While I was wondering who dared interrupt us, I heard Shen Bei beside me suddenly soften his tone, smiling brightly as he called out, "Sister." My blood ran cold. I froze entirely. Slowly, mechanically, I turned my head to look. Standing there was a majestic beauty, nodding slightly in his direction. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. Her facial beauty? A solid 10. Her figure? Easily a 10. In fact, her luxuriously curvaceous bosom made my heart skip a panicked beat for reasons I desperately tried to ignore. Then Shen Yunshu's cool, honeyed voice cut through the air. "Come home early." Like a terrified younger brother facing an absolute tyrant, Shen Bei instinctively nodded in immediate, trembling obedience. But what none of us expected was what happened next. The second part of her sentence struck like lightning. Shen Yunshu slowly shifted her piercing gaze from her brother straight to me. "You two." As soon as those two words left her lips, the wealthy friends standing around her burst into uncontrollable laughter. "Yunshu, it's one thing to tightly control your own brother, but why on earth are you trying to manage young Master Gu too?" Shen Yunshu looked right at me, the corners of her exquisite lips curling up into a dangerous, captivating smile. Her voice was cool, yet laced with an undeniable playful threat. "Indeed, I must." My face flushed a deep, humiliating shade of red. I could feel the heat radiating off my cheeks. Later that night, we all retreated into a private VIP room to drink, laugh, and sing. But the moment the clock struck 11 p.m., Shen Bei abruptly stood up. "I have to head back," he announced, looking slightly guilty. "My sister told me to be home early." Then his eyes darted over to me, adding with a smirk, "And you too. My sister specifically said you have to go home early as well." That was the final straw. I flew into an absolute rage. We aren't even officially engaged yet, and she's already trying to leash me. I am the proud, arrogant, and domineering young master of the Gu family. I am not some weak-willed pushover, and certainly not the type of man to be henpecked. Clenching my jaw, I threw myself back onto the plush leather sofa, crossing my legs defiantly. I'm not going back. Go back yourself. There is no way in hell I'm cutting my night short. Seeing my stubbornness, Shenbei nodded and turned to leave, but a sudden wave of paranoia hit me, and I hesitated, calling him back. Wait, you're not planning to go snitch to your sister about this, are you? Shenbei stopped, turning around with a completely blank, bewildered expression. Snitch to my sister about what? Dude, why are you acting so insanely paranoid tonight? I narrowed my eyes, looking at him with deep suspicion. You really don't know? Know what? Seeing the genuine confusion etched across his face, the knot in my chest loosened, and I let out a massive sigh of relief. It's nothing. Just get out of here and go home. Utterly baffled, Shenbei shook his head and walked out. Meanwhile, back at the Shen residence, Shen Yunshu sat gracefully on the living room sofa, her own legs crossed in an identical posture of quiet dominance. She looked up with a knowing, gentle smile as the front door opened. Coming home all by yourself? She asked softly, her eyes glinting in the dim light. Won't your friends be upset? Shenbei shook his head nervously. No. Shen Yunshu simply nodded, saying nothing more. But a quiet, knowing amusement danced in her eyes. It seems that little rebellious fiancé of mine hasn't returned home yet. Tisk, tisk. He really does have a stubborn streak, doesn't he? As for me, I stayed out partying and didn't crawl back to the mansion until the sun was already high in the sky the next morning. Strangely enough, grandfather didn't scold me at all. Instead, he just chuckled heartily, waving his hand dismissively and telling me to go up to my room and sleep it off. Get some rest, he smiled mysteriously. Tonight, we're all going out to a high-end restaurant to officially discuss the marriage arrangements with the Shen family. Little did I know, I could never have guessed the psychological warfare Shen Yunshu had meticulously planned for me that very night. When evening arrived, our families gathered at the luxurious venue. The moment we stepped into the private dining hall, my eyes instantly locked onto Shen Yunshu. She was breathtaking. The dazzling red dress she wore clung to her body like liquid fire, accentuating her breathtaking curves and slender waist to absolute perfection. A sharp flash of pure, involuntary amazement flared in my eyes. Is she deliberately trying to use her overwhelming charms to break me down? I thought, frantically. Well, it won't work. Desperate to regain my composure, I quickly yanked my gaze away, aggressively staring at the floor. After a round of polite, glowing pleasantries exchanged between my grandfather and the Shen parents, we all settled into our seats around the grand table. Up until this exact second, Shenbei had been wandering around in a daze, but as he finally sat down and looked around, the realization hit him like a freight train. The mysterious, top-tier brother-in-law his mother had kept so heavily guarded was me. His jaw dropped. The realization morphed into pure betrayal. You sneaky bastard, Shenbei hissed across the table, his eyes blazing with absolute fury. You actually had the audacity to put your hands on my sister? Sensing his murderous glare burning a hole straight through my skull, an overwhelming wave of guilt crashed over me. I meekly lowered my head, staring intensely at my plate, too cowardly to even pick up my chopsticks. Across the table, the Shen parents looked thoroughly delighted by my sudden modesty and quiet demeanor. Originally, when Grandfather Gu had first proposed the political alliance, they had planned to firmly reject it due to rampant rumors labeling me as an insufferable, arrogant young master who looked down on everyone. But Shen Yunshu had surprisingly nodded in agreement, overriding them all. And seeing how quiet, obedient, and well-behaved I looked right now, they were more than satisfied. The dinner proceeded remarkably smoothly. Laughter filled the room, pleasant conversations flowed, and the foundational details of our upcoming wedding were firmly locked in. As the night came to an end, both families stood up to leave. At that exact moment, my grandfather turned to me, flashing a deeply meaningful, knowing smile. Dean, he commanded gently, drove Yunshu home. My heart leaped into my throat. I snapped my head up, nervously glancing over at Shen Yunshu. She was already looking right back at me, her lips curved into a soft, teasing smile. Instantly, my face flushed bright red once again. Useless, helpless, and completely at her mercy. Defeated by my own racing pulse, I could only nod obediently.